So, just check, and we are live. So, thanks for tuning in. I'm really excited about this. If you're not sure what this is a music live stream feedback chat type of thing. We're gonna play it by ear and see how it goes. In the meantime, let's introduce what is this anyway? What is this that I'm starting, this new platform? This is gonna be called FaceLoop, and it's kind of a platform I've been thinking about for a while, and I think finally this is the first step to get this started. So FaceLoop is gonna be all about communicating with producers, teaching, educating, sharing music, promoting, and lots of other things that I have planned down the road, and perhaps some new content coming down this week, along with this weekly live stream. So this live stream will be broadcasted every week. So hopefully every Friday or Saturday. Stay tuned for that. But yeah, so if you're a producer, a music maker, or if you're curious about music production, whether you're advanced or beginner, there's no problem. Just send a submission down in the form here below. There's going to be down in the description. Or if you're looking to find out more information as well, just stay tuned for the Instagram page. It's at FaceLoop, so PhaseLoop. And we can get more information out there that way there. And then, yeah, so that's kind of FaceLoop. I know it's kind of an interesting little thing, but I'm really excited for it. So thanks so much for joining us today. And otherwise, a little bit about myself, if you're not familiar with me, I'm Gabriel Fortuna, and I've been teaching Ableton for a couple years now over at Beat Drop here in Canada. And this is, Canada's first certified Ableton training center. And it's been a blessing. It's been, teaching and working with students every year has been just a blessing. So, one of the things that I really was taken aback by, teaching with all these students is the feedback aspect. When you first start teaching them some concepts, everyone's got some ideas and some things that they're looking to make with their music, but it's only maybe like 6 weeks in, 7 weeks in, that most people just get really into it, and you see like students kind of firing ideas back and forth, and everyone's like, yo, check out this beat and check out this thing. And that's when it got really exciting for me. And I noticed really early on, I was not just like excited for my students, but I was really proud. I was really impressed what everyone was making, and I was so happy to help them like take it to the next level. I think when you're a beginner producer, it's very easy to feel overwhelmed with all the choices. Software, hardware, there's so many options for us to go down and experiment, and sometimes it's great, and sometimes it's distracting. Sometimes it's a little bit kind of a not a waste of time, but it can be frustrating, right? So when you're feeling creative, it can be a little bit frustrating to just kind of wrestle with the technology that we're working with, right? So what I'm hoping to aim to do with FaceLoop is kind of bridge the gap between beginners and advanced producers who are looking to make either the same kind of music, different kind of music. So whether it's inspiration or just helping each other out or promoting and, giving a shout out to your buddies and getting them on here. Yeah, it's going to be fun. So that's about FaceLoop, a little bit about myself. And what about this show? So this show is going to be a little bit, I think like a little bit of like a radio show I want to think about. And I'm going to play some tunes for you. These are user submitted tunes some of my buddies have sent me, and we'll talk a little bit about them. I should actually load this up for you. Let's take a look here. So we're going to play the tunes all the way through today. It's not going to be a long show today, but first up, if you are interested in submitting tunes, again, like I said, there's going to be a Google Doc form on the bottom of this video feed, and there's going to be the same link on the Instagram as well, so you can check that out there. There's the only kind of rule we have for now is just submit only one track per week. So whether it's the best track you have, something you're really excited about, work in progress, really, the sky's the limit here. And down the road, we'll start maybe developing a concept for each week and developing a theme. But for now, let's keep it open. Let's keep an open mind. Let's have fun. And yeah, just enjoy this show. So first up today, we have a track by Mark Cruz, aka Fat Rock, on SoundCloud. So you can find him there. And he submitted his track called Attack. Now he says, Attack is one of the first few tracks I created. As a rookie beatmaker, I'm trying to create vibes that are groovy and bouncy and mature. Not really knowing how to arrange music that well, I attempted to create changes that were interesting, hence the solo towards the end, and a little change in groove as well to add a sense of completion. So kind of gives you a vibe, an understanding of where he's going with this. So I'm gonna start playing the track here, and yeah, let's enjoy. All right, dope. So really digging it, Fat Rock. So here we have, this track, super soulful, super moody, super kind of like, I feel like this retro vibe happening. And I think it's interesting because, you're saying like as a beginner rookie, and I feel like a lot of the time when we're starting to make music in Ableton, we feel like we need to be a little bit apologetic, but I think like your musicality is like really off the charts here. Your sense of rhythm is great, and just the fact that your melodies are so unique and, well put together, like very, very thematic and very melodic. So I really appreciate that. I think there's a lot of expression that went into this writing. And yeah, no, it's awesome. So I think for you, I'm thinking the arrangement actually works quite well. You have these moments of builds and, like building and release of tension. And that's really important, whether you're doing it through rhythm or making the music a bit more dense. This is a really common technique. Now, I think if you wanted to extend that further, so if you wanted to add more like intensity or, maybe, make it more dramatic, you could try adding a couple more layers. I wouldn't go too crazy, just maybe another layer of instruments to, as you're building, give it more intensity. And if you're dropping it, then even take away more instruments. So you can think of it as going to more extreme ends when you're arranging the transitions and build-ups of your song. But overall, I think the flow works really well, so great job there. And in terms of production, I really like the synth that you're working with. And of course, the drum machine is kind of like a classic, like a 808 type of drum machine sound. You have this kind of like juicy bass happening, and everything sounds really clean, really sharp. The only thing is, of course, I think if you notice in some of the waveforms, you'll notice some of the later waveforms we'll play today will be a little bit chunkier. And that's okay. I think like in this show, we're going to be talking a lot about work in progress, or, taking something that's like almost a finished product or perhaps a finished product and maybe taking it to the next level for the next song you make. So think of all this feedback as something you can always keep working on and developing, because as artists, I feel like, honestly, because I've been making music for a while, you're never finished. You're really never done. You're going to be looking at a track and you're like, it's almost finished. It's almost perfect. But you know what? At some point, you got to just stop and, just ship it. Just share it with your friends and, share with, your DJs and get it out there. I think it's also about being able to call it a day there with a lot of this music. But in terms of the production, I think going back to a little bit what I was going to say is I think the mix is really good. The balance of all your instruments is really well done. You can hear the bass, you can hear the melodies, you can hear the drums, you can hear the little percussion. There's like a little, like a rattly percussion sound that you're using, and I love whenever that comes in the verses. But otherwise, I think one thing you could try, depending on which way you want to take this track, is, or other tracks like this in the future, is if you're looking to make it like more lo-fi or more like in your face but still clean, there's two different routes. And I think if you're going more lo-fi, you can try things like using a bit more filtering. So using like EQ curves to taper off some of the high end and add a little bit of distortion or a little bit of saturation to some of your instruments, specifically the drums. It'll make them pop a little bit more. It'll make them kind of crunchy. Now there's different tools for this. If you're using Ableton 10, of course, we can use like the drum bus. And if you're looking to make it a bit more clean, punchy and in your face, but still keep a similar vibe, then it all just comes down to a little bit more compression. And I think it'll be mainly in the drums. I think a lot of your instruments are pretty, tame already as it is. But I think as a music producers, we have to be considerate of transients. And again, as you're maybe like rewinding back to the waveform scrolling by, just notice whenever there's a big transient and a big spike in your waveform. Sometimes that's what you need, but sometimes you also need to tame those a little bit. So if you're not too familiar with using compressors, that's something where you can start looking at, how to start getting, a hold of compressors and limiters a bit more, so you can control your dynamics a little bit more. But I think that's all I can say for you, Mark. Really, really lovely track, really moody again, and I can imagine this like in a lot of different scenarios, especially in commercial work. So depends what you're looking to make there. But yeah, great job. I think we're gonna look at our next track here, submitted by Shirohana over at Shirohana Music on SoundCloud. And he doesn't have too much to say, but he says mainly it's 2 tracks that he's written, and he's not sure if it's a good thing that he put 2 of the tracks together. And you'll notice that there's a kind of transition between them. And, he's asking, should I split them into 2 tracks and just make 2 different things out of them? And, I think as we listen to this, just, we'll think about this. Think about how the ideas in part A kind of relate to part B, maybe how the transition will work. And sometimes if it flows well, just leave it. If you feel like there's potential to take it to the next step, and make them really unique things, you can also go that way. But before we make any decisions, let's take a listen. I'm gonna load this up here, like so, and let's take a listen. Awesome. Holy. So, it's a very different kind of track, of course. And yeah, I really like those drums. Like, that's the one thing that really stood out to me is the sound design and the kind of the sampling of the drums. There's kind of really organic Foley sounds, but really, really organic, really pretty, and they blended in really well with the music. So kudos to you for making that happen. That's awesome. I think it's often understated how hard it is to kind of actually make that. Now, as to your feedback for like your main concern is that you have two tracks. So you have kind of first track, and then you have this fade out and these like field soundscape things happening, and then they blend into the next track. Now, it's really subjective, you know, with how you can do it. I think as it is, you could probably release this all as one track, merely based on the fact that your drums are so tight and they're kind of related. Like, there's certain sounds, there's certain moods, there's certain like textures in the percussion that really tie the tunes together. So that's the main thing that I would say. But if you're feeling like melodically or harmonically it's not tied together enough. I think there's one thing you can do to push it and kind of make it really tied together more. And that's just to take, it's a really simple trick, but it's just if you try to take some little element, like a little melodic element or something, a little motif from the first section, and try to sneak it in, like maybe at the beginning or maybe towards the end of the second track. So this way you have something kind of carrying through and being a little bit more consistent through both tracks. I think the music, like the mood that you've created, is really, it's very moody, it's very kind of down tempo and, atmospheric for both tracks, which is really cool. So you already have something tying them together. Now it's about maybe taking a little motif, and maybe you can take a little melody from the first part, adjust the rhythm a little bit, just something that really makes the kind of listener feel nostalgic about the beginning, but now you're feeling it in the second half, right? So I think that's just my tip for you there. I think in terms of, mix and all that stuff, really great job. Just watch the levels. I know, depending on what kind of things you're using for limiting at the end, might get pretty loud. But yeah, I think overall it sounded really well, kind of crispy, and I really like that aspect of it. So great job. Let's take a look at another track here before we start running too late. This one's submitted by True Knot, and True Knot's a local here in Calgary, and he's submitted two tracks today. So first one we'll play is called, I believe it's called Gurphy's Law, and it's featuring Ann Taylor, another local musician here, and really excited about this tune because it's off his album called Novalia. So he's been kind enough to give us some tunes to play, and perhaps we'll give him some feedback on what we think. So hopefully we'll enjoy this. Let's just set this up and play the next track.
Wrapped up in the past, sifting through what we had, knowing all this won't last.
All right, sick. So that was again True Nuts, Gurphy's Law, and yeah, really sick track. So that's something I really didn't expect there. It's a the beautiful piano intro, like really kind of romantic feel, and this beautiful voice coming in and just kind of soothing you into the tune. What's really funny is that like once it picks up, you go from this like very soothing, like atmospheric, like really pretty tune to this like tune that just makes you want to dance. And that's something that I feel like whenever I heard True Nuts music before, it's just like it makes you want to dance. And that's you got that, man. So otherwise, yeah, for feedback, just yeah, keep that up. I think one thing that really stood out to me a lot is the way you use Anne's vocals here in a very almost like as an instrument rather than a vocal lead as a lead singer. So that's something that often you hear in EDM or like electronic music. You hear these big fun dance tracks, and they're using like very melodic using a lot of lyrics kind of vocal style, and that's cool too. Like I love that stuff, but this I think what you're doing here is something that you're trying to experiment with, that you really have a vision for, and I think that's something to be appreciated. So kudos to you there. And yeah, just keep it up. I think production's awesome. I really dig also the kind of interesting percussion. There's some kind of like some otherworldly ethnic percussion in there, and I think that's really cool. Kind of a blend, with electronic music. I think electronic music is often just put into one corner. So we all use 808s and 909s and analog synths and this and that and like Massive and Serum, and all that stuff is really cool. But it's also great to kind of take influences from the more acoustic world, the more organic world, and I think you did a great job blending those in together. So yeah, just keep it up, and mix is tight. Waveforms look good. So yeah, just keep writing, man. So let's look at our next track here. This is by Ashley Velvet, and you can find her on SoundCloud as Ashley Velvet, all one word. And yeah, this track is called Phantom. Now, she has a bit to write here, so I really want to make sure we get through this. So Phantom was the first song she produces, Ashley Velvet. She says, I had a lot of restraint making this track because of the lack of knowledge I had with working with Ableton then, but that ended up being part of her inspiration. And I think that's really important to outline, because I remember earlier I was saying kind of, sometimes it's frustrating to deal with the technology, and sometimes the challenges that come with them are worth kind of overcoming. So it's good to like deal with it a little bit and try to overcome these challenges. Sometimes it leads to really great things. Sometimes it's a learning experience, and sometimes you're not sure where to go next. But it seems for Ashley this was a big inspiration for her. She keeps saying, I'll keep reading here. So being a self-taught producer, I was teaching myself a lot of things aside from just refining my craft while making Phantom. This song is about being comfortable with yourself and your thoughts when being alone. I was channeling a lot of loneliness, but also I was feeling hopeful that eventually I'd be able to find myself. And I did so by learning and growing my skills as an artist through Phantom. So without further ado, let's bring this song in here, and hope you enjoy. All right, holy, what a tune! So that was Phantom by Ashley, and yeah, really lovely tune, super melodic, super just like lush and kind of mesmerizing in a way. You know, just, there's all these little melodies and hooks that fly by you, and they get layered and not layered, and they come and they go so seamlessly. It's I would love to see Ashley how your project is laid out in Ableton, how you're kind of bringing those ideas in. So yeah, so subtly, you know. It's I think this is something that maybe is characteristic of some styles of music, but I think yeah, for what you're doing here is really unique. You have this singer-songwriter style, and you're blending it with very like strong electronic vibes, but it's very organic at the same time. It's hard to explain, but yeah, I really appreciate like that. The way you're bringing things in and out is so subtle. There's only a few moments where it becomes like apparent that you're doing, like you're making a change. Otherwise, you know, there's this kind of like wave that you just keep interweaving and changing, and as you're moving through it. So yeah, really cool track in that sense. Yeah, production wise, I can't believe that's like your first track. As like it's amazing. I know I say this a lot to people, but like, you know, like my first few tracks, I mean, I think like my first like 20 tracks were just nowhere near close like any of these tracks we've been playing today. And you know, I always encourage producers like, you know, don't be so apologetic, like, you know, be confident, because what you're doing now is really great, and technology keeps getting better, but I think at the end of the day it's about your ideas. And if your ideas are good and you have patience with them, working with them, like, you know, these frustrations, these challenges in the technology, and overcoming them, then you make some really lovely stuff that's gonna be memorable, not just for you but for others. And I think it's really important to, you know, consider when you're making music for others and for yourself, because sometimes there's some tracks that you may have an idea that came from yourself, but then that emotion, that feeling can extend onto others as well. So being able to do that, that's really powerful, Ashley. So good job there. I think in terms of, like mixing and mastering, everything was really level, quite nice. The mastering, I was noticing the levels are really good too. The only thing that stood out to me in one part was maybe some synthesizers are like a little too like together, and like a lot of the melodic stuff is very panned and very lush. But some of the stuff that's like more chordal and more harmony can be maybe a little bit panned as well. And sometimes if you just look into like a stereoizing or widening your pads, those kind of things, but not too far, because then you go too far on the stereo field and it makes them too wide. It sounds kind of awkward. But just opening the stereo field a little bit, adding a bit of reverb. I think definitely you already did. But yeah, spreading out the stereo field is something that I always recommend to people as well. So I think your dynamics and mixing is already great. So maybe, if you're still looking like, okay, what else can I do next time to step it up? Maybe think about the stereo field in this sense, because like panning is like placing your instruments in one spot in the stereo field, but stereoizing and making like wide instruments, wide synthesizers, or wide drums, that's kind of a whole different thing. And I know it's becoming kind of a newer trend to try and develop the widest music and the loudest music, but I do believe that there's a lot of separation that you can create in your music when everything's very cleverly spread out in your stereo field. But otherwise, still, like, you've already done an amazing job in Phantom. I would say, just keep up the good work, and just be honest with yourself, and keep making the music that you want to make. So awesome job. We're gonna play another track here by a producer called Netrunner, and Netrunner is on SoundCloud as Netrunner, except instead of a U, it's gonna be a V. So you can check that out. And he submitted a track called Firewall. Now he says Firewall is a work in progress track for Netrunner's episode 3, introducing the album with a more typical synthwave style that then pulls away to convey the awe-inspiring and oppressing firewall within the net. So, without further ado, let's take a listen. beautiful. Just I almost forgot to change the camera because I'm like so lost in that little atmosphere at the end. But yeah, great job, Netrunner. So that is so synth wavy. I love it. It's just like the textures and the sounds, the tones, the synthesizers are very much of the genre that you're pursuing. So I think if you need feedback on that, you're definitely nailing it. And that steady vibe, like in the bass, like it gives it just like that, I don't know, that nice pulse. But yeah, just that driving force is really important. So one thing I want to say that you do really well is, wow, like the way like the song starts really kind of like in a minimal sense, with some drums, a little bit of bass, and a little bit of synth, and it builds right up until like that end where it drops into that ambient section. And it's very seamless, and you feel like it's interesting because I know this kind of structure is hard to do for a lot of producers because it's kind of like you have a vision for it, but it's not conventional in a lot of ways. People want like this kind of verse chorus verse kind of thing, but in your track you're doing this big build, and I personally do a lot of that kind of myself when I'm doing like live looping. I love building like these great walls, like you said, these big walls of sound, and I think you do that really well here at slowly introducing that, and just using different elements, different synthesizers, different instruments like that guitar in the background. That's that I was really surprised to hear that because I know in a lot of this music you don't hear like this kind of like retro like kind of rock guitar. But no, it sounds really good in this scenario. So that is really good. Let me just see what else was written here. Right. So I was trying to take some notes. So one thing I think in terms of like production, I know you said it's a work in progress. So one of the things you can think about to build, and add more dynamics is working with a little bit of sidechain compression. I know it's kind of a trend that everyone's using, sidechain compression. But I noticed particularly between the kick and that bass, that pulsating bass, I didn't feel like it was going up and down, and I didn't feel like it needs to go like up and down, like bouncing, but I felt that the bass was very much like just here, where you could have it do a little bit of this. So just a little bit. So I'm sure you've heard of sidechain compression, so check it out. It's not terribly hard to set up, but if you need some tips, just make sure your attack on the sidechain compression is really short, and you make sure you nail that release. The release has to come down, the compressor has to come down just in time, like how to explain. So when the kick hits and it leaves, and it kicks and it hits again, you want your compressor to affect your bass at the same time, up and down, within that time frame of the kick drum. So it's kind of hard to explain. I think next time I'll bring up like an Ableton screen to show you a little bit better with a visual. But yeah, you really got to nail that release so that it's natural. But I think the goal of it is just to do two things. And I think sidechain compression is, can be overused, but is really popular because it works. And I think the two things it does really well is it helps bring out, it helps pop your kicks through the mix, but it also helps add a little bit of extra movement to the bass that you didn't have before. Something that you might have to animate and manually draw little envelopes on the bass to give it like up and down movement and like a flow. And again, the degree of which you do this is up to you. I think some producers, they might do like negative 12 decibels of change, or, in negative infinity for how much bass you're taking out whenever the kick hits. I think in your case, you just need a little bit, 6 decibels, like up and down, just a little bit, so that it's moving like very subtly, but it gives it extra bit of motion. And I think that will help keep the steady pulse and the build even more exciting. It's gonna feel like even more wavy. So anyway, I think you should try look into that a little bit. If you haven't thought about it already, maybe you haven't. I'm just saying stuff that is irrelevant at this time. But yeah, that's one thing that stood out to me in this track. Otherwise, great job on the synths. I think I wouldn't mess with the synths too much. They have that perfect synth wavy vibe with the way the tails, and I noticed there's some pitch bends and lots of expression in the melodic part of the synthesizer. So definitely keep that in. That's the sauce that you have going on. And otherwise, yeah, just yeah, just keep pumping those tunes. And if you need more advice or yeah, just looking for more feedback, just hit me up and yeah, we can talk about it. But otherwise, great job. So yeah, let's look at 2 more songs we have for today. We're gonna wrap it up pretty soon here. This one's by Anand on SoundCloud, and you can find him at Anand-Amar, so it's Amar at SoundCloud. And he submitted a track. It's actually a remix by Weathen, or well, it's a remix of Weathen's Top Shelf. So he says, this is just one of many projects that I've been working on. I struggle with mixing and mastering, making sure that it still sounds loud and aggressive. I particularly think I did pretty good on the mix, but I don't know. So thanks, Anand. Let's have a listen and yeah, see how his track is doing here. And let's just hit play.
If I could keep you safe in the top shelf of my heart, the world is full of hate, so I loved you from the start. When it's cold outside, when your bones are tired, I will carry you. I wanna keep you safe in the top shelf of my heart. Throw my sins right on the table for all my flaws. Be forever grateful. Every single road that you're gonna cross, I'm telling you to hold on to what you got. Embrace the wind, and you will sail. If I could keep you safe in the top shelf of my heart, I wanna keep you safe in the top.
Alright, Anand. Wow, so that is a party track. Yeah, really proud of you, man. You know, I've known Anand personally before, you know, and worked with him over at Beat Drop, so it's been amazing to see him grow so much as a producer, and I think that's, you know, he's one of the students that I feel really kind of inspired me to even start this, this kind of, beginner to intermediate to advanced producer conversation is something that I feel like should happen a lot more often. And it's hard because, how do you meet these people, right? So anyway, this is why this is a platform. And you're doing amazing. In such a short time, you're making really cool music. And this is a party track. It's hot. I know you said like it's a remix, but to be honest, like the mixing is great. Mastering, mastering is funny because like a lot of people are not too familiar with like what mastering involves, and depending on the genre of music, depending on the producer, depending on who's mixing and who's mastering, it really depends, and it really means different things. So that's something to keep in mind. But let's talk a little bit about the track. So I remember this track from Weathen. Originally, it sounds a little bit different, but the kind of like the main drop is similar. But I feel like your track is a bit more cleaner. Still a lot of energy, like really punchy, and just somehow I feel like yours is a little bit cleaner. I forget why. I'd have to listen to the original and compare. But yeah, I really love what you've done with the breakdowns and the sweeps and like the drum fills. Like it's great. I think musically, the track is working really well. The builds and the lows, like the highs, it's just like the release of tension is working really well. So if you're sending this off to your DJs, I'm sure they're loving it. And if you're not sending it off to your DJs or you're not playing it at your shows, you definitely should, man, because it's gonna be a bumping party if you're dropping this. But yeah, otherwise, in terms of music production, I think I wouldn't add anything else to the track. I think as it is, it sounds really full. It sounds like really wide, stereo-wise, volume-wise, everything. I think the master, I was reading on my little meter on the computer, and it's a little loud. And I know in this genre of music, like loud is better. Just be careful. I think sometimes like I look at a track and I'm like, okay, maybe you should make it a little bit louder. But then you reach a point where it's like, okay, I think like you don't need to go any louder, and it's a little bit subjective, but I think the loudness war is something that we have to be aware of as producers, and we don't want to get too carried away. Like just because we can make it louder than the loudest person out there, just I guess keep it within like reason, and especially when you're sending it off to DJs, you don't want them to be like blowing any speakers or upsetting any bar owners or anything like that because you are dropping like really really loud tracks. Excuse me. And so just watch the loudness. I think what you have going on now is perfect. So in future tracks that you're working on, or if you're remastering this track, kind of try to keep that same loudness level. So whatever limiter or maximizer that you're working with to do your mastering at the end of the chain, I don't think you need to go louder or softer. I think it's really good there where it's sitting. And then I think otherwise your goal here is to make something like very loud and aggressive. I think loud, done. Aggressive, it's pretty aggressive in a sense, but I think like the synths are so I think the synths are the more aggressive part of it, but some of like the keys and the pads, like the really beautiful stuff that you have going on, that's it makes it less aggressive. So I think something you can try is perhaps, and I think I mentioned this to Mark earlier as well, is try to go to the extreme when you're going through build-ups. So when you're doing a breakdown and you're dropping the drums and you're dropping some instruments, really strip away like as much as you can so that the high point, like the difference between the high point and the low point, is really big. Not so much that it's like silence, but like you just somehow control the dynamics and the tone so that you strip away more. And then when you're building up and you're doing these builds and crazy builds and like layers come in right before you bring it to the peak, maybe try to take something out. Like again, so that the difference, like the second before the drop hits should be like almost silence or like very little things to a big nasty drop. And I think that's what makes it sound really powerful, really punchy, really aggressive. Another thing you could try as well, like there's so many options, but I'm just giving you some ideas. So first idea, go to the extremes with your build-ups and your drops. And the second idea is to add some saturation to some of your drums. It could be, it has to be done with a little bit of taste, but using like saturation or a distortion unit on some of the drums, like especially kick and snares, you're going to be able to like really punch like that through, and it's gonna kind of slap people in the face. And if you're looking for aggression and like really high energy music, sometimes that's just what you need. So the only thing I will warn you about is that with snares, like saturation, distortion, it's pretty fun. It's doesn't get too unwieldy, but the kick drum you have right now is really nice. So just if you're trying any distortion, you have to be careful with how much you use or which type you use, which plugin you might use for distortion or saturation, because I think the kick you have right now is really punchy, and maybe all you need is just like a nasty snare to like smack people in the face. But anyway, that's just some thoughts there. So great work, Anand, and I look forward to hearing more tracks from you soon. Last up, we have just one more track from True Knot, and we're gonna close off the today's feedback music day. And I want to say thanks to all of you who submitted tracks today. I just want to say before we play the last track again, it is True Knot, so I won't close off any feedback with him at the end, so we'll just kind of close it up here. But if you're looking to submit any tracks for a future events like this one, it'll be happening every week, and you can submit to my Google form. So there's a Google form in the description of this video, and you can just hit the link, submit at least one song, maximum one song per week, and you can keep trying. And I'll be going through as many as I can every week. I don't think it'll be impossible, but the only thing is we might have to start, depending on how many submissions we get, we might have to start like playing only sections of a song. But, let me know what you think. If you think we should play the whole song or just sections of a song, do like a DJ style mix. And that way we can kind of go through everyone's work. I would love to do that, just go through as many songs as we can and go through as much feedback as we can in one session. So anyway, hope you've had fun. I know it's been really interesting for me sitting here with you guys and playing these tunes and, taking a listen myself and just like jamming on them in my studio. So yeah, hopefully you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have fun. And I'm just going to close it off here with, this is called Lumnock by True Knot, featuring Every Heart Kills, I believe. And yeah, we're just going to play that here and have fun on this weekend. We'll see you next time. Stay tuned for next show next week. It's going to be posted on Instagram as well as on this YouTube, so just keep an eye out for that. All right, let's go.
Lend me your ear quickly. I have a thought. One of those light bulbs flickering on and off. Wires crossed. Assemble the thugs. Treat them. Give them the world. Hate is the burden of a saddened man. They're all in the room. Now gas them out. Give them light. Give them world. Give them light. Give them world. Give them light. Give them world. Give them
All right, so we have a last minute entry, and this is from, let me just quickly check this out. So this is a new submission from this stream, so I just wanted to get through it really quick, and we're taking a listen to it right now. And it's by Kevin, and it's called Rhythm Game. Now, I'm just gonna take a listen to this. Enjoy.
No more games. No more games.
All right, awesome, Kevin. So, yeah, so this track here was submitted just kind of last minute, so I didn't have a good chance to look everything over too much. But I'm just gonna read really quickly his response to the submission. Just said this is his first song, and he would like some feedback on it. So, first of all, really good rhythm. Like, if this is your first song, like really good tight rhythm. It looks like you're kind of trying to go for this kind of trap, like a filthy trap type of thing. So you got the bass style down, you got the drum sound style down, and I think you got like a really cool, like, eerie melody that gives it like this kind of dark aesthetic. Yeah, and I think in terms of like what else you can add to it, right now it's really minimal, and you can add some other things to spice it up and give it more depth. Now, some things you can add that are really small are like atmospheric layers in the background, like little notes in the background, like a slow melody haunting in the background with a lot of reverb, and just push that in the background, and it just fills out the space a little bit more and it gives it like depth in the background. And then the other thing you can try is adding, like, I think for the vocals that you have, I love the samples of the vocals that you're using, but you can try using some effects, so maybe a little bit of delay or a little bit of a little bit of reverb, just to give those sounds a bit more depth as well. So right now you have like the foundation, like a really good foundation for the style of music. Now it's about adding a little bit more sparkle, and I think just adding a little bit of delay here and there, maybe adding the background layer. If you're familiar with pads, like making synth pads, I would definitely look into that. It's something just like an atmosphere that you put in the background, and it gives it a little bit more depth. Now, there's one more thing I was going to mention, and that's as I'm listening to this here with the speakers, and I'm kind of touching my speaker just to feel the bass. You have a good, like a good kind of growly bass, but you need to have a little bit of sub bass. So I think right now you're lacking, like you have sub bass in the kick drum, but you're lacking the sub bass in the actual bass sound. So when you're listening through headphones, sometimes it's hard to tell like how much there is. So if you have access to any equalizers or tools that have a spectrum, so you can see the bottom end of the spectrum and see how the bass frequencies are, we're looking for frequencies around, let's say, 50 hertz, 40 hertz, up to 100 hertz. You want to have like a strong sine wave up in that area. And sine wave is the simplest waveform you can have that will just make the room shake. So if you need a tip, essentially you just need to take that synth that you have for the bass, double it, and just make a sine wave synthesizer instead of a growly one. And then the sine wave one, make sure it's really nice and deep and it sounds in harmony with the one that is like the filthy bass. But that way you're now going to stack like a gritty bass with a sub bass. And then you're going to get a lot more pop. You're going to get a lot more room shaking when you're playing this with speakers or in someone's car. So that's all the feedback I had for you. Honestly, I think if you keep working on it, make another submission, let me know how it's going, give me an update, and I look forward to hearing how that's sounding next time. So yeah, just make another submission next time, tell your friends, make sure, yeah, we stay in touch, okay, Kevin? All right, so the rest of you guys, thanks so much for tuning in, and again, thanks so much for submitting content this week. It's been a blast. I kind of like didn't realize I would spend, you know, over an hour like doing this, but I think an hour is kind of what I'm aiming for. So once a week. That's it, guys. It's going to be at Face Loop at Instagram, all right? So catch you next week.